Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared Podcast. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the PBSC podcast. This is Steve Moore along with Mark Castleman here, and we are talking about episode 303 today that comes to us in question form from a partner. And the title that we've added to this, just to give you, to wet your recovery whistle, so to speak, is what does actual accountability look like for a porn and sex addict in real recovery? And she indicates this at the beginning, that this is something we do touch on quite a bit, but I don't know. I think we've done episodes on this before. We'd have to go back and look through our whole catalog.
Quite a while, probably.
But it has been a minute. So we're going to go ahead and read this because it does have important detail in it, but it also does give kind of some context about approach and tone that might become relevant more in the discussion later today during the podcast. So welcome, everybody. We'll dive in from a partner. I'm wondering if you can help us with this. You touch base on it at times, but can you go into depth of what healthy accountability looks like and what it doesn't look like, and also specifically about how he's allowed to have feelings, meaning her addict partner, but now that looks but how that looks and how it doesn't look. I know I'm not alone in this, which with my husband having slips with scanning. Our son just graduated from the Marine Corps, which was a huge deal. 3 days of event on base. As you can imagine, the crowd was large and of course, beautiful women everywhere dressed in different revealing ways. So while I'm there excited for my son, looking to my husband to share in my joy, there he is looking at women's bodies like they're objects. He tried to be subtle, which also tells me he knew just how wrong it was. So afterwards, I confronted him. This was a milestone for our son and for us, and instead of protecting that moment, he exploited it. When confronted, he denied it, then admitted to it, then denied it again before finally admitting to it. My response was basically, quote, I don't need you to confirm what I already saw with my own eyes, unquote. The hardest part is what happens after. He spirals into self-pity, and those spirals look like this. And then she goes through this series of steps. 1, he starts saying things like, this breaks my heart too, or we're both hurting in this. We're in the same boat. But we are not in the same boat. I had no control over him betraying me while he chose to do so. Number 2, he turns the focus to how hard recovery is for him, how exhausting it is to fight urges, how bad it makes him feel that he keeps hurting me, but it's still all about his feelings, not mine. So that's number 2. And then number 3, he'll insist I'm not letting him have feelings, when the reality is I just don't carry them for him. He wants to share his guilt, shame, and despair with me as if that will lighten his load. But it only weighs me down more, especially when he goes into blaming me for not being supportive. And then our last bullet point, the end result of these spirals is that I feel silenced. Instead of being able to express my pain, I'm forced to manage his. And then she goes on to say and finish, it's like someone who keeps getting speeding tickets. They know the limit, they know it's a speed trap, and they keep speeding anyway. And they cry about how unfair it is or how expensive the ticket is instead of just accepting the consequence. Stop speeding. With my husband, it's the same. Stop scanning. Stop betraying me. Stop acting like this is something happening to him instead of something he's choosing. On top of this, we're coming up on our 20th wedding anniversary. Honestly, I want nothing to do with it. Why celebrate 20 years that should have been about us when in reality I've been an option the entire time? He gets sad and hurt by my reaction, but I don't even care anymore. Unless he radically steps up and puts action behind his promises, then I'm just wasting more years waiting to be chosen while he keeps holding on to quote-unquote them, referring to women or the addiction or lusting. For context, D-Day was 2 years ago. D-Day or Discovery Day was 2 years ago. He claims recovery since July of last year. He has attended different programs, worked on different things, and she goes on to say he's often skipped or half-listened rather than engaging fully. He doesn't have a sponsor, and although he swears he's been seeking one out, no one will take him on. At this point, it feels like too little, too late. says he's not masturbating, not watching porn, and we're selective about TV, but the evidence I live with doesn't line up with someone deeply engaged in recovery. So, my question is this: can you help us and other couples in this spot better understand what healthy accountability looks like in situations like this? What it means for him to quote unquote have feelings without dumping them on me as another burden, and how to separate genuine accountability from self pity spirals that shift the focus of the betrayed spouse.
Yeah, shift the focus off of the betrayed
Or
spouse.
yes, yes, off of the betrayed spouse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Sorry about that.
yeah. Man, as we read this, I mean, Steve and I have been at this for better than 20 years and helped couples, it's probably in the thousands by now all over the planet. This is so, so common. This partner is absolutely not alone. Uh, Man, to every betrayed partner out there facing these kinds of circumstances, our hearts go out to you. We have people we're working with in our individual practices where this is the case. We have lots of people in our Dare to Connect program that have similar challenges. And it was a little tough for me to read because I could relate to it a lot. I could relate to this addict partner that she describes. If I go back to my deep addiction days, I vacillated between a number of these conditions or states that she describes in him. I would be in total stealth mode, where I was trying to manage the image that I was portraying to others and how others perceived me, right? Control, 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 while still living the double life of the addict in secret, behind the scenes, and then the public mark. That was something I can absolutely relate to, and the going into total shame and self pity mode. Right, come out of the secrecy, try to face the stuff, the aftermath of acting out, and then feeling total shame and regret, and then self pity, and then doing what? Dumping those feelings on my wife. As opposed to establishing my own recovery system, my own support system, she became kind of my dumping ground. So I could absolutely relate to that. And then the other part of quote, checking the recovery boxes, so to speak. I was always looking for the next magical solution that was going to get me out of my addiction cycle. And I'd pound the desk and say, "That's the last time," and then just go right back into the same cycle again. And the whole time, right, living in it's this crazy cycle of addiction where we go from, we're in control and denial, right, back and forth. We're trying to control life. That's what addiction is all about. Whenever life gets hard, we use our addiction to cope, right? I was not willing to surrender and get on the real path of recovery. And why was that? One thing was my addiction outlets had become my way to cope with life.
Mm.
Hard life, difficulties, difficult emotions, problems in my marriage, problems at work, problems with family, problems with fill in the blank. Going to the addiction outlets was the way I dealt with life. And so a big part of me didn't want to give up that primary coping strategy.
Mm.
Survival
Yeah.
brain says, no way, we're not giving this up. So thus the in recovery, out of recovery slips and relapses and back to sobriety. There was a big part of me that says, no way, how am I going to face life on life's terms without this? The other part of it was decades and decades of addiction formed some deeply, deeply rutted neural pathways in my brain. And it is, let's not candy coat this, it is difficult to come out of those rutted neural pathways. It takes work, it takes focus, it takes patience, right? And the other part of it was I was not willing, and I didn't know how to what we call get under my addiction, to what was really driving it. What the addiction's a symptom. What was driving it deep down? I wouldn't or couldn't, go there. And so what would I do? I just took all that deep down stuff and just dumped it on my wife, or just went silent and stoic and didn't express it at all.
Yeah.
I could really relate to what she's describing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the frustration, I mean, as you listen to this submission is very palpable. You can hear it a lot, and there are a lot of elements to it that I think are very very relatable, right?
Ah,
We, as Mark indicated, we hear this from partners far too often, and we know that this situation in her case has been going on since D-Day for a couple of years, but clearly there were issues most likely stemming from addiction before Discovery Day, prior to that. And so a lot happening there. Um, what does actual accountability look like in real recovery?
good question.
It's a big, it's a big question. And, in Dare to Connect, I, I believe I came up with a term the other day that I can't even remember what we termed it, but it was something to the effect of true accountability, I think is what we called it.
True accountability. Yeah.
Because addicts really do, like Mark indicated, addicts do tend to oscillate quite a bit. Um, and accountability, we're sort of like the ping pong. When I was a kid, you'd play, you'd go bowling with the big, but you were little, so that your parents would put the bumpers in. And so
Yeah.
you'd throw the ball and it, hit off the side like 55 times going down the lane. That kind of is how it sort of looks in my mind, when I think about those early days of trying to discover accountability. Because the left bumper, like you said, is ego, pride, minimization. I don't have a problem. What are you talking about? You have a problem. You're the problem, right? Defensiveness, closed off, etc. And then the other bumper is shame and I'm
Mm.
horrible. I'll never be better. It's Eeyore mode, as we call it in Dare to Connect Incarnate. Um, and what we're aiming for is to throw that ball down the middle,
Right. Throw the ball down the middle. Yeah.
right? That's how you get the strike, which is being able to look and be able to recognize, look, here are things that I need to change. Here are things that I need to improve. I attended a 12-step meeting for my own recovery this morning, and I heard a phrase that I hadn't heard in quite a while, but essentially it said honesty with self first.
Honesty with self first.
And I thought it
Yeah.
was kind of an interesting way of phrasing it, just
Mhm.
this need to be honest with ourselves and to honestly assess, to be able to see ourselves through an accurate light of, yeah, here are my assets, here are my deficits, here are the things that I'm really struggle with, but here are the potentials that I bring to the table. Here are the things that I need to take ownership for. Here are the things that I might need to communicate my needs or wants regarding, right? And that in of itself is a huge, massive journey. And we're going to talk about this a little bit further into the podcast. But honestly, um, if this true accountability concept does not just apply to the addict, this true accountability concept applies to the other side of the coin. Of course, not with regard to the addiction, but with regard to responses, with regard to managing one's own emotions, etc. And we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But that honesty for the addict side, I mean, it's recovery isn't possible for an addict without this, right? It's non-negotiable. It's not an option. Marriages don't survive without accountability and transparency. Individuals do not recover without accountability and transparency.
No.
If I'm not willing to take the hard road to look at myself in the mirror and say, as a client of mine once said, ask myself, where's the poop? Where's the crap? If I'm not able to do that, then my chances for recovery, as Sexaholics Anonymous says, are slim.
Well, and I agree with you, Steve. I mean, that was the first real recovery. And I mean real recovery. I went years looking for the next program, checking the boxes, saying the right things in groups, on and on and on. My recovery didn't take off until I faced this issue. I
Yeah.
had spent my lifetime hiding. I had spent my lifetime wearing masks and facades, trying to look good to the people around me, control how people perceived me, make sure that people thought well of me and liked me and that I was pleasing everyone. And then I was living this secret life to cope. And so the very first step for me was to get honest and transparent at all costs. And I mean all costs. You know, Steve, you often talk about, you got to the place, and so did I, where you just said, I'm either going to live in the bright spotlight in total transparency and authenticity. I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not.
Yeah.
And I refuse to live that way anymore. Right. And we, all of us who have had success in recovery and healing, had to get to that place. I'm just not willing to not live honestly and transparently anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
consequences, bring them on. Bring them on. Because this is the way I live now. So that's got to be a progressive journey to be willing to and practice and learn how to live in total transparency. That's first. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Hey, everybody. PBSE podcast hosts Mark and Steve here with a special message about our revolutionary online recovery program for addict spouses and couples called Dare to Connect. Multiple times every week, we get messages from subscribers in the program. They're people just like you. They're trying to heal from the devastation of sex and porn addiction and betrayal trauma. And here's a few of our most recent submissions. Here's one from an addict in recovery. It says, D2C has principles that everyone should utilize regardless of their circumstances. It doesn't matter your coping mechanisms. It matters that you want to work towards genuine connection with your partner.
That's awesome. Another testimony from an addict continues on. My wife is just starting out in training as a licensed therapist. Dare to Connect has been far more useful to her than her degree.
Wow.
The way Mark and Steve apply what they've learned is always so redemptive. D2C has opened doors for my relationship that I thought would be shut forever. Mark and Steve are an incredible resource of information on the subject of sex addiction and betrayal trauma. We could not do this journey without their help.
Here's one from a partner who's been with us for nearly a year. I want you both to know that it is because of you guys and D2C that I'm able to be in the place that I am today. I will always be grateful to you both for your feedback and prompt replies to my questions. I can't even come close to putting it into words how valuable my time spent with y'all this past year has been to my life. Thank you for everything you taught me about betrayal trauma and boundaries and thinking errors and loving myself and making myself a priority and standing up for myself.
Love that submission. And then as we close out here today, guys, one more account from another addict in recovery. I wish I had a platform like this 14 years ago where I could have learned and done the hard work of recovery before I had done all this damage to myself and to my spouse. And to be candid with all of you, that's exactly why we created Dare to Connect. You know, Mark and I found ourselves in that place. You know, messages like these and the others like them, they're what Dare to Connect really is all about, guys, and why Mark and I do what we do. Whether you're an addict or a partner of an addict, and no matter where you find yourself in the recovery process, Dare to Connect can take you to the next level. Don't wait another day to catapult your recovery forward. Today is your day for change. Visit us at daretoconnectnow.com to pick up your free 2-week trial of Dare to Connect today. So it all hinges on this accountability piece, right? And that in of itself is a journey for an addict because it involves all sorts of things. Shame resiliency skill sets is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to develop out, and I know this may sound silly, like we're talking about the Wizard of Oz, but developing one's courage, right?
Yes.
Being able to just say hard things. I mean, every addict I think has to take those difficult steps. I still remember the first meeting I attended where I lied to everyone and said I was Bob and I was visiting. But, you know, in a 12-step meeting, you say, you know, I'm Bob and I'm an addict. And even saying I was Bob, like my voice caught in my throat when I said, and I'm an addict. Like I just was like,
I know, right? Well, I mean,
you just say that was terrifying.
And one of the other crazy important thing, and I didn't have this for a long time because of the shame, the embarrassment, the awkwardness. Proactively, and I mean proactively, putting together a support system that is not your betrayed spouse or partner.
Yeah.
She can't play that role. She should not. So joining 12-step groups, getting a sponsor. She says he says that no one will take him. I have a really hard time believing that if he's really proactively attending, multiple groups a week and actively letting people know he's looking for a sponsor, right? Also, what we call an accountability partner, just guys in a group who touch base with each other via phone or text, just to touch base how things are going. Accountability partner,
Yeah,
right? Having a therapist if needed, a Dare to Connect program, and then having that whole support system. And here's the huge thing: truly, truly working in your support system, not lip service, right? Your partner is not your primary recovery resource. This whole support system is, and you proactively putting it together and then working the crap out of it. It's got to
absolutely.
happen.
No, 100%. Well, and then there needs to be, I mean, there's the other side to this, right? Which is then sharing. And this may sound self-explanatory to some, but we're always shocked. I guess not shocked, but it is always fascinating to see how often, and I did the same thing. It's not like I'm any better, but how often we will do the worst of both worlds, meaning we start to do these things. We're making these changes or we're doing these things, but then for a variety of reasons, what do we not do? We don't share it with anybody.
We don't share it with anybody.
We don't tear it. We don't tell our partner. We don't walk them through what we're doing or not. And like I said, I think there are a lot of reasons why that happens. Um, and we won't go into those today for sake of time. But the other piece of this is opening up that dialogue, right? And being able to say whether it's in a weekly in-person check-in or some sort of an email or whatever is appropriate for your relationship, there has to be an opportunity to develop out consistency, transparency, vulnerability, and accountability. And whatever way that works, whether it is ideally at least with a partner, but then like Mark said, sponsors and others, we need to be owning that with somebody.
Yes,
Addiction thrives best in its own shame-based and minimization, justification, rationalization-based echo chamber.
that's totally true.
You have to get out of the echo chamber.
Yeah. Well, and one of the reasons why this support system that you work and stay in connection with on a consistent daily basis is because what has to happen in recovery? It's got to be an all hands on deck to gain progressively longer periods of sobriety. Right? What
Yes.
calls it the progressive victory over lust, which includes, for example, scanning in public or whatever the various aspects of one's compulsion or addiction are. You've got to get a handle on it and do whatever you've got to do in order to get longer and longer periods of sobriety. And
Yeah.
that's not going to happen in a vacuum or by yourself or reading books. You have to have people who are farther down the road than you are, and you're bouncing stuff off of them. You're getting input. You're being accountable, transparent, vulnerable, right? But you've got to get longer and longer periods of having a handle on this.
Well, and there was something interesting in this submission. And I just wanted to hit on this a bit, and we don't have much context to it, although we could probably surmise some of the reasons behind it. But she, this partner who wrote us in, talks about this interesting dynamic where she says, "I confronted him about it. He denied it. Then he admitted to it. Then he denied it again, and then somehow circled back to admitting it again."
Mm-hmm.
And that in of itself sounds like it's its own little mini story.
It is. Yeah.
But um, what, I will say this for every guy who's I can admit, like I said, we can imagine some of the reasons why that may happen. Whatever we are doing in recovery, gentlemen, even though it's not tied to this accountability piece, it is tied to stability. Slow it down.
Yeah.
Slow it down and be deliberate in what you're doing. The only thing worse than one could possibly do in terms of being accountable than lying about something and then owning it is lying about it, owning it, lying about it multiple times, then eventually landing on owning it. Um, we really do and like I said, I can get behind some of the reasons. We won't discuss those today, but we need to be slowing it down and saying, what is going to be my next move? Why am I going to take it? Am I going to be honest? Am I not? Why or why not?
Mhm.
right? And we really need to examine that. Accountability begins with oneself. Am I asking these kinds of contemplative questions? Again, this sounds so basic maybe to partners, but it is not as basic as it seems, right? Being able to slow down the process and say, what are the outcomes of each of these? Which feels most authentic to me? Why or why not would I want to do this, right? We have to stop just reacting.
Exactly. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. The other side of this, and I really tuned into what she said, that he made comments like, "We're both in the same boat," right? This
Mm,
is, and kind of pulled her into his addiction or compulsion world. One of the things that is essential for accountability, right, real recovery, is this whole process of empathy from us as addicts towards the partners that we betrayed. We're doing a deep dive in empathy right now in the Dare to Connect program. Really deep, I think a deeper dive than you will have ever experienced with regard to empathy, probably in your lifetime.
mhm.
If you were thinking about coming and joining Dare to Connect, this would be a great time. We're only about a week and a half in on empathy, and we've got a whole other rest of this month to go on empathy, and then we're going to get into accountability, and then finally boundaries. Right, it's a whole cohesive process. But I would encourage this guy and anybody who is struggling with compulsion addiction, who's in a long-term committed relationship, getting to this place where you learn within your support system how to lean in, truly lean in to your partner's pain, sit with her in it, lead out in that process, right? Understanding and proactively learning and practicing empathy. What does it mean? What does it look like? How do I do it? Right? She didn't cause this. She didn't deserve this. I'm the perpetrator here, right? I'm the one that's engaged in the secret sexual basement. I'm the one who is engaged in many ways in emotional abuse. There's a lot of things that have happened here. Can I really pull off my protection, this false protection, and start to really be vulnerable and lean into what she's been through and is going through?
Mm.
It's essential to my recovery as an addict.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well, and I know we're getting close to closing up here, but this empathy component, is multi-pronged. And the skill set for an addict to develop this out is wide. And like Mark said, we just happen to be diving into Dare to Connect right now, so the timing is kind of opportune for the partner submitting this. Um, but because in order to be able to do any other element of recovery on the addict side, we have to be able to connect on some level with the pain. One of the most important things to remember about empathy, and one of the things that I think most people get wrong in culture, probably the biggest barrier to empathy, is that somewhere along the line we got in our heads that if I'm going to empathize with somebody, I have to have been through what they're going through. If I'm going to empathize with someone who just lost their parent, I have to have done that, or a severe illness or whatever case may be. And if I can't, then because I'm not an expert on that dynamic, then I can't empathize. But empathy specifically is not a connection around circumstances or situations. Now, that's a great bonus if you can. Obviously, that can kind of enhance the connection between the two people. But when I'm empathizing with another person, I am doing my very best to step into their world as much as possible. But in situations where I can't because I've never experienced that, and even if I can because I have experienced something similar, it's still doing what? It's connecting with and putting myself in the space of feeling the emotions that are attached to whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's connecting to what is this grief and loss for you? What does it represent? What is it like for you? I always think back on a client who came into my office one day. It was a woman that I was working with. She came in and she was struggling with immense, immense guilt because she attended a family or a funeral for her father that had just passed. And she was feeling a mix of anger and guilt. Well, why? Well, at this funeral, person after person got up at the service and said what a great man this guy was, and pillar of the community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, she'd been sexually abused by him while growing up,
Mm.
and nobody knew.
Yep.
And she felt guilty. Why? She was happy he was dead.
Mm.
Not happy in a vengeful sense. I don't want to misunderstand. In a relieved sense. He's gone.
Yeah.
I can move forward.
Yeah.
But that did not square with what everybody else was feeling, right? And the typical person who's looking on that on the outside must, I'm sure she probably went to that funeral and probably heard all sorts of what things. Oh my gosh, this must be so devastating. Oh my gosh, this must have been the hardest thing in the world. How have you possibly ever navigated this? I wonder how many people actually bothered to ask her, wow, what an experience. What, I mean, I can only imagine what has this been like for you? You know,
Yeah.
something to think about. So,
The other side of this, and just to finish up with the addict and real accountability and recovery, and we can't say this enough, Steve, can we? Consistency, consistency, consistency. I'd like to say consistency for the next 10 minutes, repeating the word, right? So let me give you an example. How could this guy be consistent in his being account able and response able, taking his own recovery, by managing it, leading out? This scanning situation, you could tell this is a big, big barrier in their relationship. Well, going forward, if I was going to be consistent and proactive and accountable, I would say to my betrayed partner, hey, I know we're going to be going to this public event this weekend. I just want you to know that I know that I have been really difficult in those situations in the past, making it really difficult for you. I have been putting together a plan to go into that space. I've bounced it off my support system. Here's the plan. What input do you have? And then I would finalize that plan as the guy in recovery, and then I would work that plan actively in that public space. And then I would have a debriefing afterwards with myself, my support system, and my partner. How'd it go? Here's what I was doing. What were you feeling or seeing as we were together? And
mm,
even having as part of that plan, bouncing those things off, if you're in a place to do it, actively in the public space, right? A touch on the arm. Hey, sweetheart, how you doing? Right? Here, I'm working my plan right now. Here's what I'm thinking or feeling. Right? That proactive moving forward. That's just one example of how a guy in recovery can be consistent and proactive in his accountability with regard to the scanning scenario. Just one idea. There's
yeah.
lots of those.
Well, and the final thought as we close up, empathy, we do obviously we've talked this whole podcast about empathy on the part of an addict for a partner. There is a less popular side to this, but we'd be doing you all a disservice if we didn't mention this. And that is the reverse side and the role that empathy can, and frankly, if an individual or a coupleship is to recover, must play for a partner. Um, Now, I can imagine that several partners are now looking at their radio dial and contemplating what is the cost benefit analysis of smashing this radio right now while this is playing in the car to make this stop because I don't want to hear this. And if that is the case, we definitely can understand, but we would lovingly say perhaps there is some confusion for you about what empathy means, which is part of why we're covering it so in depth and Dare to Connect right now. Simply put, I'll just say that as simple as I can for sake of time. Empathy is never has been, nor will it ever be co-signing on another person's bullshit, including your partner. Empathy is not agreement. It's not uh, endorsement. It's not uh, in some way making it okay or minimizing the damage that is being done or the hurt or the impact. It simply means trying to understand. Now, why would that be necessary? Steve is not talking about this today because you're going to make Jesus cry. Well, if you don't, the reason why I'm talking about this, and even though it's unpopular, is because we have worked with too many spouses over too many years for too long, not to at least instill that idea in you because the resentment, the anger, that so many spouses very understandably use in a well-intentioned, albeit dysfunctional way to try to create space or to protect themselves from elements of the addiction and betrayal that have happened in their marriage that are very devastating. No matter how well intentioned are just that, and dysfunctional are just that, they're dysfunctional. Um, Resentment and anger will only carry a person so far. They can keep a person safe, but they also mitigate intimacy. And in the long run, if a coupleship is to make that long term leap towards healing, there has to be a space eventually. Emphasis on eventual. Some of you may not be in a place to even contemplate this. And if you're in the place of wanting to smash your radio, then we hear you and we validate that. But if you are in a place where you are possibly seeing how uh, the presence of only the anger and frustration and a lack of any sort of empathy with what is going on with your addict partner, if you are in a place where you are starting to suspect or feel or see that just maybe that could be holding you back, then that may be something you want to take a closer look at. Empathy is not just helpful, is not just necessary for the healing of the coupleship. It is necessary for a healing of a partner. I can tell you in my relationship and in the relationships that I help to navigate along with Mark, a partner understanding and recognizing the addict's position, again, doesn't make the damage less damaging, but the healing journey for a partner who is with, for example, an addict who nefariously and intentionally has set out to hurt their partner and gaslight and manipulate them over the course of however long of time, that healing journey, frankly, does look different from a partner who is married to an addict who manifested many of the same behaviors but did it for different, very different reasons or intentions.
Well, I'll tell you why this was important, for example, for my wife's healing. She got to the place, and this was very painful for her and very painful for me, where she looked at me one day and said, "We've been married for nearly 20 years. I don't know you. I don't know you. I
Mm.
don't know why you've done the things that you've done, right? The things that they had all come out. I don't know why you did them." And she said, there's a part of me that wants to blame myself. I wasn't adequate. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't responsive enough, blah, 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 blah. She said, but I want to know you now, all of you, because having all that knowledge, I want to come to the place where I can then decide, knowing all of you, which you've withheld from me for all this time, knowing all of you, do I then choose you? I don't know if I choose you right now because I don't know you. So she really went to the place of this empathy, which means I want to understand where you've been coming from. I want to understand what you went through as a kid. I wanted to understand why you betrayed me in all of these different behaviors. What was your intention? What were the feelings behind it? What was all of this about? And she decided to really lean in, which was enormously hard for her because there was a lot of anger and hurt, deep hurt and trauma. But she leaned in and really sought to come over to that side of trying to know me. And thank my higher power and all things. After we went through that whole process, she did decide that she wanted to choose to stay in the relationship. That was super important for her healing. She really did understand then that it wasn't about her. She didn't cause it. She didn't deserve it. She couldn't fix it. She knew that all those things were true because she leaned in to try to understand where I was coming from. Now, she didn't agree with it. She didn't buy into it. She didn't support it. She didn't excuse it. None of those things were true. But she was able to go to empathy. Right?
Love
I
that.
hope, I hope that helps.
It's a great example, guys, and just one of many that we could give. Um, we obviously have hit a lot in this podcast today, and some of it is probably super popular. Some of it might challenge your thinking or resonate less. If it resonates to a degree, and you appreciate the hard hitting honesty that we try our very best to bring here, we hope that you will consider coming over and giving us a try over at Dare to Connect. If you like the podcast, you will love Dare to Connect. All sorts of things are going on there right now. Too many to list. But there are, I mean, everything from advanced courses to other elements. We would invite you to come over, grab a 2-week free trial of that at daretoconnectnow.com, and we sincerely hope to see you there.
Well, and Steve,
Um,
I wanted to say one thing as we close out,
Please,
because we never
please.
want to be misunderstood. Someone who's not familiar with us would say, oh, great. So the whole solution for this partner is empathy for her addict. We haven't had an opportunity in this podcast because of limited time to talk about all the other issues we often talk about for betrayed
Correct.
partners. Her establishing her own outside support system that's
Yeah.
not her addict partner. Her learning to establish and hold very firm boundaries around her authentic wants and needs with specific outcomes and consequences, right? There's a whole host of those things that we haven't talked about today. So please don't misunderstand us in saying that this is just about empathy from a betrayed partner to an addict partner. It's not. It's one aspect, right? There's all these other, right? Empathy always is boundaried, always. So I just want to make sure that that's clearly communicated.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate Mark saying that. Those are things that we frankly cover like in almost every episode.
A lot.
So
Yeah.
we wanted to shift and diverge a little bit there, but yes, co-signing on everything else that we say on these other podcasts. It is a whole great. It's one big whole that we teach here. Like we said, if you like the podcast, you'll love Dare to Connect. If only there was a place where you get all this information in an organic way. Come on and join
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Half hour is not enough, guys. It's not enough to start. It's not enough. Daretoconnectnow.com. We'd love to have you come join that. And also, if you would like to send in a question for a response from us, albeit belated from between 4 to 8 weeks, you're welcome to do so at the same page. Click on the PBSE logo up at the top, and that will take you to a contact form where you can send those questions in to us as well.
Yeah. As always, thanks for being here with us, all of you partners, all the guys in recovery. Appreciate and love all of you, and we will continue this journey together and pick things up in the next episode.
Take care, everybody.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.